For years, a billionaire claimed his only son was born with a rare neurological condition that left him completely nonverbal. The child never spoke a single word in public, not at school, not at home, not even with doctors. Everyone believed the story. But everything changed the day the family's longtime housemaid, the only person who truly cared for the boy, was suddenly and publicly accused of stealing a confidential medical document. What happened next shocked the entire courtroom and the world. The boy opened his mouth and finally spoke, not out of fear, but to reveal the truth his father had tried to bury for years. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. Jonathan Blake, one of the wealthiest men in the country, stood in front of reporters and cameras with a practiced but emotional expression. He told the world his son Nathan had been born with a rare condition that left him deaf and unable to speak. He said there was hope, an experimental therapy in the United States, available for a limited time. The problem, he explained, was that a key document needed to unlock a massive research fund was trapped in legal disputes. Jonathan's voice shook as he begged the public and the court to help. He said this wasn't about money or power, only about saving his son's future. Viewers across the country felt sympathy for him and for the silent boy they never saw on camera. Beside him stood his lawyer, Amanda Clark, serious and determined, promising that they were doing everything possible to free the document. Amanda worked endlessly. She filed urgent motions, met judges, talked to fund administrators, and gave passionate explanations to the court. She insisted the research fund had been created to help children exactly like Nathan, and that every day of delay reduced his chances. News channels showed her walking into court with stacks of files, answering interview questions with calm confidence. Online, people called her a hero. But behind all the attention, the legal battle stayed stuck. The fund itself was entangled in a dispute, and the confidential document couldn't be released without passing several layers of approval. The judge remained cautious. Amanda grew more stressed, sometimes arguing with Jonathan in whispers outside the courtroom. Life inside Jonathan's mansion didn't match the public image. The house was big and quiet, filled with expensive furniture and long hallways that felt empty. Claire, the housekeeper, had worked for the family for years. She cleaned the rooms, prepared meals, and more than anyone took care of Nathan. The boy rarely reacted to anyone but her. He didn't cry or laugh loudly. He mostly sat in silence, staring at the floor or out the window. He avoided his father's eyes and stiffened when Jonathan entered a room. Claire noticed those details. She also noticed the way Jonathan and Amanda spoke when they thought no one was listening. Their voices were low and tense. Words like plan, timeline, and fund appeared far more often than therapy or recovery. Claire knew she was only the help, but she couldn't shake the feeling something wasn't right. Once, late at night, she passed Jonathan's office and heard him shouting on the phone, demanding that someone stick to the plan and stop asking questions. Another time, Amanda left a folder on the kitchen table while answering a call. Claire glanced at the open pages. Instead of medical reports, she saw contracts, account numbers, and signatures tied to unfamiliar companies. She didn't understand everything, but she knew those papers had nothing to do with teaching a child to speak. Her suspicion deepened. Still, the media saw a devoted father and a relentless lawyer. Jonathan gave interviews, visiting hospitals and charity events, repeating the story of his son's tragic condition and the hope that this new therapy represented. He never brought Nathan along, explaining that the boy was too fragile. People believed him. In the mansion, Nathan stayed in his room, quiet as always. But Claire, who spent the most time near him, saw something different in his eyes, a watchfulness that did not match the story of a completely disconnected child. The turning point came on the day Jonathan was supposed to bring the confidential document to court. Cameras gathered outside the courthouse. Journalists waited for the final step that would unlock the money. When Jonathan arrived, though, he looked pale and nervous. He announced that the document had disappeared from his home office overnight. Gasps filled the courtroom. His lawyer looked angry and surprised. Within minutes, Jonathan named someone to blame. He said the only person who could have taken it was Claire, the housekeeper. He claimed she had recently been upset and might have stolen it as revenge. Claire was called in, confused and scared. She denied everything, explaining she had spent the night cleaning guest rooms and the kitchen. Amanda remained silent at first, then supported Jonathan's accusation, saying Claire had been acting strangely. Some in the courtroom doubted the story, but others believed the wealthy businessman and his lawyer. Under pressure, the judge ordered that Claire be removed from the house until the investigation advanced. She was told to stay away from the family. As she left the courthouse, escorted by security, Claire turned once toward the hallway where Nathan waited with a social worker. He stared back at her, expression serious, clutching his old teddy bear. Back at the mansion, Jonathan played the role of a distressed father whose trusted employee had betrayed him. He told the press that Nathan was confused and hurt. Reporters repeated his words, but Nathan, once alone in his room, moved with quiet purpose. He shut the door, walked to his bed, and reached underneath. From the shadows, he pulled out a folded sheet of paper. It was worn from being handled and refolded. Nathan looked at it for a second, then placed it deep inside a box of toys and pushed the box to the back of his closet. No one saw him do it. Downstairs, police officers examined Jonathan's office, taking photos and fingerprints. Amanda insisted Claire must have taken the document. The judge allowed 30 more days to find it. Without that paper, the money would remain locked, and Jonathan's story would remain intact. While the adults focused on the missing document, another routine continued upstairs. Every morning, Jonathan entered Nathan's room carrying a small brown bottle and a spoon. The liquid inside smelled bitter. Jonathan called it "your medicine" and said it was important for Nathan's brain and nerves. He never let anyone else handle the bottle, not even the occasional visiting nurse. Nathan opened his mouth and swallowed, because that was what he had always done. But lately, something about it bothered him. The way Jonathan gripped the bottle, the way he blocked its label from view, the way he watched Nathan until he swallowed. It all felt wrong. When Claire had still been in the house, she had often looked worried whenever Jonathan arrived with the bottle. More than once, she had opened her mouth to ask a question, then stopped, looking at Nathan instead. Now she was gone. Nathan felt her absence like a cold space in the house. Without her, the rooms felt heavier, and he retreated deeper into his routines. But he also thought more. He thought about the medicine, about the way his head always felt foggy afterward, about how his thoughts slowed and his body felt heavy. One morning, without planning it, Nathan decided not to swallow. Jonathan poured the drops into the spoon as usual and held it up. Nathan opened his mouth and let the liquid in, but as soon as Jonathan turned away, he pressed his tongue to the roof of his mouth, trapping it there. When his father left the room, Nathan spat the medicine into a tissue and stuffed it behind the dresser. He did the same the next day, and the next. Jonathan never suspected anything. Slowly, something changed. The fog that had lived in Nathan's mind started to lift. Details around him sharpened. He noticed the pattern of light on the ceiling, the sound of pages turning outside his door, the soft hum of distant traffic. Then, one day, he heard something he had never heard before. Footsteps echoing clearly in the hallway, the quiet murmur of voices downstairs. At first, he thought he was imagining it. He sat absolutely still, listening. The sounds continued. Someone laughed faintly. Amanda's voice drifted up, only a few words at a time, but unmistakable. Days passed, and Nathan's hearing grew stronger. He realized with a thrill and a spike of fear that he could hear the world now. Doors opening, chairs scraping, phones ringing, water running in the sink. Sounds that had never been there for him before were now clear. He didn't tell anyone. Deep down, he knew the medicine and his silence were connected. If he revealed what had changed, they might try to force the drops on him again. At night, he began to listen deliberately. The house grew quiet, but Jonathan and Amanda often stayed up late in the office or living room, believing Nathan was asleep and oblivious. Their voices carried up through the floor and along the hallway. He lay in bed, eyes open, focusing on every word he could catch. At first, their conversations were confusing, full of legal terms and financial phrases. But the more he listened, the more the pieces fit together. He heard about fund transfers and offshore accounts, about timelines and media pressure. None of it sounded like medicine or therapy. It sounded like money. One night, Amanda's voice cut through the darkness, colder than usual. "If this boy ever talks, we lose everything," she said. The word struck Nathan like a physical blow. He sat up in bed, heart pounding. If he talks, we lose everything. That one sentence made sense, even if he didn't understand every detail. His silence wasn't just a symptom, it was part of a plan. The medicine, the story, the missing document, all of it was meant to keep him quiet. The realization terrified him, but it also gave him something he had never had before, a reason to fight. A few days later, while sorting through an old toy chest, Nathan found a small plastic recorder with a play and record button. It still worked. The batteries were weak, but not dead. He pressed record and spoke into it, just breathing and humming softly, then played it back. Hearing his own faint sounds proved the device still functioned. That night, when Jonathan and Amanda went downstairs after checking on him, Nathan placed the recorder near the crack under his door, pressed record, and went back to bed. Their voices floated in, not loud, but clear enough. The next morning, he listened to the tape at low volume. He could hear bits and pieces of their conversation, talk of money, timing, and public perception. From then on, recording became his secret routine. Each night he hid the recorder near the door or behind a piece of furniture. Each morning he hid it and the tape beneath a loose floorboard under his bed. He labeled each tape with a small mark, building a quiet archive of evidence. More than once, he played back a segment where Amanda mentioned keeping him on the drops, or Jonathan grumbled that as long as the boy can't talk, everyone believes us. Nathan didn't fully understand terms like embezzlement or fraud, but he understood this. They needed him silent to keep their plan alive. Meanwhile, far from the mansion, Claire refused to accept the accusations against her. She worried constantly about Nathan. A supervised visit was eventually allowed by the court, mainly because of her long history with the boy and pressure from a social worker who believed he needed familiar faces. On the day of the visit, Claire arrived at the mansion with a social worker by her side. Nathan waited in the living room. When Claire walked in, his expression changed. Not dramatic, but real. His eyes brightened. She sat beside him carefully, unsure what he could handle. For a few seconds, they just looked at each other. Then, in a low, rough voice, Nathan whispered, "Claire. Soon." It was barely more than air, but it was a word. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Before she could say anything louder, Nathan put a finger to his lips, asking her not to draw attention. She understood instantly. Later in the visit, Nathan led her upstairs to his room. The social worker allowed them some privacy, staying nearby but not inside. Once alone, Nathan knelt and lifted the loose floorboard. He pulled out the small box with tapes, batteries, and the recorder, handing it to her. Claire pressed play and listened as the shaky recording played Jonathan's and Amanda's voices. Phrases like, "If he talks, we lose everything," and "keep him on the drops until this is done," made her stomach twist. She realized Nathan had not only been listening, he had been gathering proof. But she knew audio alone might not be enough. The court would need medical evidence. Claire contacted an old friend, Dr. Marcus Reed, who had treated Nathan years ago before Jonathan started controlling all access. She explained the situation as best she could, without yet naming names. Dr. Reed agreed to see Nathan discreetly at a private clinic. Through an arrangement with the social worker, Nathan was brought in for what was officially recorded as a follow-up checkup. At the clinic, Dr. Reed ran a full examination, hearing tests, neurological assessments, and blood work. Nathan cooperated calmly. He obeyed instructions, followed sound prompts, repeated simple sounds and words when asked. Dr. Reed took notes with a growing frown. 2 days later, he called Claire with the results. He spoke slowly, asking if she was sitting down. Then he told her the truth. Nathan's brain and hearing were normal. The tests showed no permanent neurological disorder. The blood work, however, revealed repeated exposure to strong sedative chemicals that could cause delayed speech, slowed reactions, and cognitive fog. The substance was not part of any approved pediatric treatment. According to official records, no doctor had prescribed it for Nathan. Someone had been giving it to him outside the proper system. Claire felt sick, but also clear-minded. Nathan was never truly disabled. He had been made to appear that way. The lie helped someone. With that realization, the missing document took on new meaning. It might connect the fake illness to real money. The next step came unexpectedly from Nathan himself. During another supervised visit at the house, Claire noticed him glancing several times at a worn wooden toy cabinet in one corner of his room. Finally, she walked over and opened it. Inside were old stuffed animals and puzzles. Nathan reached out and pointed to a particular teddy bear with a torn seam. Claire took it down, squeezed it, and felt something stiff hidden inside. Carefully, she opened the seam wider and pulled out a folded, yellowed sheet of paper. Her heart pounded as she spread it open. It was the confidential document Jonathan had claimed was stolen. The paper described the structure of the International Research Fund, listing account numbers, transfer authorizations, and signatures. It showed that money meant for rare medical cases could be routed through an intermediary company. This company, on paper, looked like a research partner, but further pages revealed it had no staff, no lab, and no physical office. It existed only to receive and move money. The listed signatories matched names Claire had seen on Jonathan's contracts. Nathan's name appeared repeatedly as the beneficiary patient, used to justify large transfers. The document was a map of the entire fraud. Claire understood what she had to do. Staying in the house was no longer an option. The moment Jonathan or Amanda realized the document was no longer hidden, they would come after her and Nathan. She waited until a day when Jonathan was out at meetings and the schedule was less strict. With the social worker's permission, she took Nathan out for fresh air in the garden, then steered him toward a side gate. She had already packed a small backpack with clothes for him, some snacks, and the document sealed in a plastic sleeve. At the street, she called a taxi and gave the driver the address of a small apartment near the courthouse she had arranged through a friend. In that apartment, Claire spread the document, Dr. Reed's medical report, and copies of the recordings on the table. Nathan sat beside her, pointing occasionally at names he remembered from the night conversations. They both knew the next court hearing might be their only chance. Claire contacted Dr. Reed and explained everything. He agreed to testify. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was full. Jonathan and Amanda sat at the front, composed but tense. Jonathan told the judge that Claire had kidnapped Nathan and was unstable. Amanda backed him up, painting Claire as obsessed and dangerous. Some people believed them, others weren't sure. Then the doors opened and Claire walked in, holding Nathan's hand. The room fell silent. The judge asked who had authorized their presence. A court officer confirmed they were allowed. The judge turned to Nathan and, after a pause, asked gently if he wanted to say anything. Nathan stepped forward, let go of Claire's hand, and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "My father is lying," he said. The words echoed through the room. The boy, who was supposed to be unable to speak, had spoken in public for the first time. Whispers filled the benches until the judge called for silence. Claire then presented the document from the teddy bear, Dr. Reed's report, and the recordings. Dr. Reed explained the medical findings. Nathan's condition had been induced, not inherited. A financial expert later confirmed the document's authenticity and the fraudulent structure of the fund. The recordings captured Jonathan and Amanda talking about money and keeping Nathan silent. With all of this in front of him, the judge ordered Jonathan and Amanda to be taken into custody while a criminal investigation proceeded. In later sessions, full charges were brought: fraud, child endangerment, and attempted embezzlement of international funds. The case against Claire was dropped. The narrative the world had believed shifted. The sick, silent boy was not a medical victim, but a witness to abuse. In the months that followed, the court had to decide Nathan's future. With Jonathan facing prison and no other suitable family members, Claire requested legal guardianship. Social workers observed them together and reported a strong, healthy bond. In a quiet hearing, the judge asked Nathan where he wanted to live. Nathan looked at Claire and said, "With her, she's my real family." The judge granted Claire full guardianship. Nathan's life transformed. Without the sedative, his mind and body recovered quickly. He attended school, made friends, and discovered he liked drawing and science. People stared sometimes when they recognized him from the news, but his days were mostly normal. Claire, seeing how many children suffered in silence, created an organization called the Hope Voice Project. Its goal was to support kids who had been manipulated, neglected, or used, giving them legal help, therapy, and safe spaces to speak. Years later, when a small documentary crew asked to tell the story of the project, Nathan agreed to appear, Not as a victim, but as someone who had survived. At the end of the film, he faced the camera in a plain room and said in a calm, steady voice, "They wanted to silence me. But no one can silence the truth." The screen faded to black, but his words stayed with everyone who heard them. A reminder that even the quietest child can hold a truth powerful enough to bring down a lie built on money, fear, and power.